I love drawing. Drawing is what I do best. I like to daydream and make up stories to create adventures. The only praise I get is for my drawings. Often, I get in trouble because I'm drawing when I should be doing something else. But when it's time to draw, I am both at my happiest and at my most confident. I want to draw straight from my heart.
In getting to know Pat and her work, obviously, when you scratch the surface and you start to learn a little bit about who she is, you learn a lot more about what she's about and where she's come from.
When Charles Corot called Pat people's artist, I believe it was because he was able to see in her that how she relates with people and how her art relates with people. She's one of us, and you have this peaceful feelings looking at her artwork and also meeting her.
Who is Pat Moss? The people's artist. She is a popular artist, a popular painter. She is a very talented lady. She's a friend. She is a communicator in that she uses art to communicate not necessarily with the art critics, but with the people.
Pat can't stop painting. That's the way she reacts. For example, when 9/11 happened, she felt it, but she had to express it through a painting that she did. So, and that's, I suppose, normal for an artist, you know. But I can't imagine her not painting. That's just the way she deals with life through her. You know, I think it's more of a need for her to do that than really to make money.
I think that she has always been, and I think that's part of who she is. She is a very direct person. She will tell you what she thinks. She's not into things that are more complex. She's into, this is how it is, and I think that's what portrayed in her work.
Sort of Pat's philosophy, she tries to show the best of life, not necessarily the black side, the sad side. She tries to show the best side, and people read it that way.
But this is a very special lady. And understand, as Thomas Jefferson said, you're remembered more for what you give than what you take, or words to that effect. She's given much of herself. She's recognized that the good Lord endowed her with tremendous talent, and she worked on that and developed it, overcame somewhat of a handicap when she was a child, and kind of therefore today she's trying to give back.
P. Buckley Moss, a widely acclaimed, prolific American artist that overcame a learning disability, tough criticism, and pressure from the modern art culture, tells of her incredible journey and the resilience that inspires people. She once stated for an article in Art Gallery International, "I think of myself as a painter-preacher. I make people feel good. I almost feel a responsibility to find joy for myself and thus for other people."
Don't you love it? You get excited when you bid?
Yeah. Pat Buckley Moss's ability to trust her own instincts, achieve greater lengths, and to look within herself. Author Toni Morrison once wrote, "Wisdom is a gift. You can't train for it, inherit it, learn it in a class, or earn it in the workplace." Patricia Buckley, later known as P. Buckley Moss, was born May 20th, 1933, to Vincent and Elizabeth Buckley of New York City. Elizabeth's parents came to America from Italy and settled in New York. Vincent's parents, Daniel and Mary Frances Buckley, were of Irish-American descent. Pat, along with her older sister Mary and younger brother Dan, grew up at 3843 Amboy Road, Great Kills, on New York's Staten Island. The Buckleys eventually moved across the field from Daniel and Mary Frances Buckley at a time when New York's Irish population clashed with the Italians, the newest immigrants of the day.
the Irish didn't like the Italians, and the Italians thought the Irish were all drunks. So it was really very interesting place to grow up. My father used to call my mother a mountain guinea from Brooklyn, so that was just a fond name. It doesn't sound so fond, but it was a fond name. Mom was a lot of fun, and Dad really enjoyed her. Mom really brought a lot of life into it. I was just reading a letter from a cousin of mine when Mom died, and she said she brought laughter and fun into all of our lives, cousins, everybody.
My mother says when she and my father were married, they had $5 between them.
In 1929, 26-year-old Elizabeth met and married a young Irish American named Vincent Buckley. Vincent was a stockbroker on Wall Street, and Elizabeth applied for a job with Catton Brothers, a children's clothing design company located in the Garment District.
She had no background to be a designer, but her sister was a designer. And so she went in for an interview, and she said, "Oh yes, I'm a designer." And so they hired her, and she was really very good. And she was a designer until probably into her early 80s. She was a designer. She was a lady with a lot of energy.
Grandma was also a career woman. She was a hard worker, had a good work ethic, and I think Mom got that from her too. And I know that she designed my mom's wedding dress.
Daniel Buckley, Pat's grandfather, also played a pivotal role in her life. His encouragement of his granddaughter's tenacity and integrity helped Pat to overcome the obstacles in her young life.
When I sit on the floor beside him in his rocker, I can talk to Grandpa like a true friend. He listens to everything I have to say and never speaks down to me. He makes me believe that if I want to do something and try my hardest, I will succeed. I try to be helpful to him, so I run across the field from my house as fast as I can to deliver a message. It's Grandpa who calls me Split the Wind.
Certainly my grandfather was the first teacher I ran into who said to me that I was okay and I was pretty special and I could do something with my life. I think my grandfather didn't realize how well he was naming me when he called me Split the Wind. My grandfather he spoke to me as though I was an intelligent person. He asked me questions as though I was intelligent. So I knew he expected me to be intelligent, and so I was relaxed, and we got along very well together. And it was a wonderful, wonderful gift to me to have a grandfather. I was brought up in a Catholic school, in a Catholic home, in a Catholic town. My grandfather was a trustee of the church. My father was a trustee of the church after my grandfather. He enriched my life like you wouldn't believe. I'd come home from school and I lived with them then. Mama lived across the field and my sister was married then, so they lived in that house, and I moved out and lived with Grandma and Grandpa over here because Grandma and Grandpa had a lot of room. And every afternoon he'd say, "Come on in, Patrick, sit down and talk." And he would talk and talk, and it was just a very enriching time. It was just, see, the Lord gave me all these wonderful little gifts all the way along, and I really believe that.
As Pat watched her older sister Mary take part in school and other activities, Pat looked forward to school, begging her parents to let her go with Mary. Mary's bright beginnings at parochial St. Clair's Primary School encouraged the nuns to make an exception for Pat. Pat won acceptance, allowing her to start school early. Although Pat's enthusiasm for her new experience quickly turned sour, as the frustration of not able to distinguish letters and words made reading nearly impossible. Pat had dyslexia, but it would be decades before it would be diagnosed.
I wanted to die and get buried in the woods. I think I told you before, I wanted to run away and be Tarzan, so I wouldn't have to go to school. I thought that boy was really lucky. He could live in the woods, not have to go to school and fail.
Once a teacher was reading our essays out loud. There was an essay which made everyone laugh. I didn't understand why, but to be part of the crowd, I laughed along with the rest of my class. When she came to the end, she called out my name. My essay, with all its misspellings and topsy-turvy sentences, was the cause of all the laughter.
People thought her stupid, but she was not. I knew she wasn't. She just could not read.
Many of her years in school were very, very unsuccessful because she saw things totally different than other children in her class, and it was difficult for her to read. It was difficult for her to visually see the words on the page, the written language, and Pat sort of escaped into her art. And what was really neat about that was it helped her perform better as a student. And when we look at the national research of children that are exposed to art score higher on aptitude tests in mathematics and science because of the exposure, their individual expression that they're allowed to have in their own artwork.
Kids are just different, if they're just wired different. I don't know. You know, sometimes I just feel that kids are wired differently because a lot of the kids that I've taught that do have learning disabilities have also had great artistic abilities or acting abilities. They have more artsy abilities. And I wonder, maybe they're just wired differently and we're teaching to the wrong wires.
Her challenges as a child and growing up with her learning disability, and at the time she grew up with that learning disability, I think is a different era than what we're in today, where it's much more known and much more accepted. During that time, Pat was treated differently, and to know that what she has overcome to be who she is today is inspiring.
Failed my way through grammar school. I was a tall girl, and I was probably this tall when I graduated from grammar school, and I don't know how I ever graduated because I never passed anything, but the nuns were kind and they kept pushing me along. My sister was very smart, and she was, you know, a great example for me, but not really because I couldn't read.
Teachers and students misunderstood Pat because of her dyslexia. Not understanding her problem also caused Pat great anxiety. Her outlet was her drawing. She took out her paper, pencil, and her imagination. She started to draw from within her own imaginary world.
Yeah, she did. She spotted the art talent. She spotted that I could paint pictures, you know, and that was, she said, well, she can paint pictures, and you really better push her along that line because probably she can't do another darn thing.
She did her painting at school because I wouldn't let her paint at home. I thought she was scribbling. I said, I want you to study, Pat. You're not going to get through your academic subjects. So she did it all at school. And this is how I found out that I had an artist in the family.
In Pat's dreamy world, she skated on ice, flew like a bird, or even rode her imaginary horse, carefree to the outside world. Artists have portrayed horses as a figure of power, freedom, sensuality, and expression for centuries. And Pat's childhood dream of owning one would have a deep impact on her career. Pat's mother would say to her, "If you want a horse, draw one." The horse would become Pat's favorite subject and symbol.
They're what I always wanted. If I could ever have a horse, I would have died and gone to heaven.
I was given a pair of old green jod hoppers to wear when I helped out at the riding school, cleaning out horse stables. I always go after the stray horses that wander into the marsh, having run away from someone's riding lesson.
But then God gave her this wonderful gift of art, And it was one of the nuns in school who discovered this and called me and to come and see her portfolio. And I was amazed. So one day I took her over to Washington Irving in New York, because by this time we lived in Staten Island. And I talked the principal into accepting her in that school because it was out of the zone. I told the principal that we didn't have an art school in Staten Island.
Strong in the arts, the school was an opportunity for Pat Buckley to excel in her obvious talent. With 4 classes of art every day, Pat was achieving greater heights with her drawing. It was there that she wrote and illustrated her first story, Billy Mean Goat, about a little boy meeting a defiant goat.
There were a few people in Washington Irving that made me feel very good about myself. One of them was a young art teacher who was just kind of off the wall, and she was wonderful and free and marvelous. One was an English teacher, and she was older. There were about 4 or 5 of us, and she would take us to these very special art movies, and they were wonderful experiences. My only problem was they were after school, and I was in New York City, and when we got out, she'd say, "Now you all know how to get home, right?" And I would say, "Oh yes." Everyone else said, "Oh yes," so I said, "Oh yes," too, and I didn't know what subway to go down. I didn't know where to go when I got down the subway. I couldn't read hardly. But eventually I'd get to South Ferry. I'd get on a train, and if I recognized a station, like Union Station or one of those, I knew that I could get out and go up the stairs and find the train to South Ferry. So that's the way I functioned. I would get to South Ferry, and then sometimes I had to wait. If it was very late, you have to wait half an hour, and if it's very, very late, you wait an hour for a boat. And I used to take the ferry boat over to Staten Island and get a train to Great Kills. The other person that was very important was Mary Mead. Mary Mead was Margaret Mead, the anthropologist's sister, and she was the principal of the school. A difficulty with my art teacher in the last year of school. She was kind of a bully, and she was a very sour old lady. She used to make everybody cry, but me, I wouldn't cry. And I just thought she was a silly lady, very silly. And she wouldn't put my name in for any scholarships.
While at Washington Irving, Pat often visited her mother Elizabeth at work, which wasn't far from Pat's school. After taking the subway from 14th Street to 34th Street in downtown Manhattan, Pat had to walk through Macy's department store in order to reach her mother's office. There she witnessed firsthand the craftsmanship of a designer in action.
She was a great designer. She was very, very good. Very, very good at what she did. And I'd go up and sit in her design room with her while she finished. She might have an hour or 2 more to go.
Pat's attempt to emulate the fashion scene, the Fashion Drawings 1 and 2, show a keen eye on design, a fundamental element of composition.
I got out of school at 3 and she got out at 5, I think. And it's wonderful to be in a design room and see what goes on and see how people work and see what demands are and how a business goes. It's really great. I'd sit there and sketch, and then we'd go home together. When I was in Washington Irving High School, I found out about the Cooper Union.
A school founded by Peter Cooper in 1859 in New York City. He believed that an art and mechanical program should be accessible for the residents in the city. And although her abilities were being acknowledged by many people, one of her teachers purposefully omitted Pat's portfolio for consideration to Cooper Union.
And my art teacher just found me a very stubborn person, and she did not want me to take the tests for that school. But she couldn't stop me from taking them, so I went and took them. And luckily, I was one of the ones who got into the school because it was my kind of place. It was the kind of place I belonged. It was the kind of place where they understood that you did not have to be a straight-A student to have a talent of a sort, you know, and it was a great place for me.
Enrollment at Cooper Union is solely based on merit, and every student is awarded a full scholarship. When Pat received an acceptance letter from Cooper Union, everyone was surprised that the girl who couldn't read was going to the prestigious art college.
She was a well-trained artist. You know, she went to art school. She knew medieval art, she knew the modernists, she knew the French schools, she knew the Romantic schools, she knew the art which primarily told stories. She knew the Japanese woodblock prints. This is something that her public probably doesn't understand, in that she was well trained. She was academically trained.
The teachers take a genuine interest in each of us and give us enormous encouragement. My symbolism has found acceptance. Negative criticism has been replaced with positive guidance. I know my art is valid. Now it has a place in the world, and I know I will make it as an artist.
And I never could understand it in the beginning, but I understand it so well. It's research and development. So engineering is research and development. Electrical engineering is research and development. Painting is research and development. And it's working. Who invented the light bulb? Right. And what did he do? He worked his brains out. He had a studio and he worked and loved what he did.
Pat's art took on several different styles at Cooper Union. Her combination of spiritually significant and stylistic renditions set the tone for the distinctive simplicity that is characteristic of her work today. It is at this time that the influence of early 20th century Bohemian Italian painter Amedeo Modigliani becomes apparent in her work.
She was influenced by Modigliani. Modigliani, like Pat Moss, was an artist interested in life and in depicting not necessarily the color of a person's hair or the fact that their skin had wrinkles or imperfections. Instead, he simplified his figures, especially his women. He pulled out the face on a long neck so that the face would really stamp into the viewer's memory. Modigliani, it's said, he burned his candle at both ends, and he died young. Pat, likewise, is interested in the essence of human beings, yes, in the essence of being beautiful, yes, and she also uses many of the same devices that Modigliani used. Pat's candle at times has burned at both ends, but she has been very careful in that she is in control of the candle. She is in control of her own creations, something that many artists are not. Pat was trained or was very interested in medieval art. And in medieval art, they use a lot of what is called iconography. That is symbolic art that has very deep meaning. The tree, of course, is an ancient symbol. To the ancient Greeks, the oak tree meant eternal life. To Christians, it's associated with the tree of the cross. It's a very deep religious symbol. Its branches are up in the air and its roots are deep in the ground. And the tree stands there as something solid, something that, like the cross, like the tree of life, like the family tree, something that is part of the world of permanence.
But an interesting thing, in art school they always tell you, please don't put a line through the middle of your painting because it'll split it in half compositionally. With Pat's painting that doesn't happen. Tree is used as a compositional element and it kind of cuts the painting up into little vignettes so you don't look at the whole thing at one time. And really, you see the tree, but you look past it. You look past it to the landscape that's beyond that.
Pat's work shows her iconic figures, black cats, geese, and her characteristic trees up front. Her use of figures shows Pat's understanding of the importance of order and morality, which she derived from her Italian Catholic roots and her relationship with her audience. honoring God with one's thoughts and works. Pat's renditions of the crucifixion in different styles, from the yellow crucifix to the blue crucifixion, also form a common denominator throughout her work. It was at St. Clair's Catholic School on Staten Island when she was younger that Pat and the other students were required to write AMDG, Ad Maiorum Dei Gloriam, at the head of each paper. The Latin translates, all for the honor and glory of God. Although not required to write the Jesuit motto anymore, Pat would often remind herself of its deep meaning and continue to write AMDG long after her school days ended.
I always tried to do my best, believing that what I produced was indeed for the glory of God.
There were always in her work, even from the beginning, it was crucifixes and Madonnas, and she's always been very spiritual.
At the age of 22, Pat Buckley's philosophical thinking brought her to the writings of 13th century scholar and theologian Thomas Aquinas, who was later canonized by the Roman Catholic Church. St. Thomas Aquinas' 22-volume Summa Theologiae was the primus for her senior class assignment. Pat's abilities in calligraphy proved noteworthy when she transcribed and illustrated Aquinas' Book on Man, a section out of the Summa.
What can I tell you about St. Thomas Aquinas? To me, it was a thrill to read the book, and I could not read. Remember, it was very difficult for me to read. So what I did was transcribe the book. I transcribed the book in a calligraphic form and bound the book. And in transcribing it, I had to write it over and over and over and over. And there was some sort of a depth of meaning that stays with you. There's something, and I can't verbalize that which stays with you, but there's something that stays with you that is so beautiful, and you think, oh God, what a beautiful mind this person had.
Pat Moss is an intense person. She is not adverse to speaking her mind. In that way, she's like her mother. Her mother was intense and outspoken and funny. Pat can be intense, outspoken, and funny, or very, very serious. She has an idea of what the world should be like, and it's like her art. And if someone doesn't come up to these saintly ideas, or doesn't do what they're supposed to do honestly, she expects people to be honest with her.
We're alike because our dispositions are exactly the same. We flare up very easily. We like the same kind of things, even colors. We're the same about colors. We lend ourselves to blues. And you find that even in her artwork, you'll see a lot of blues in it.
The idea of the spiritual man being superior to the physical man. The corporeal reality struck a chord with Pat. Her stylistic paintings show emotion and an emphasis on beauty and happiness, not the sin and ugliness of the world, or the disappointments Pat herself went through. This concept is shown in one of the illustrated pages of St. Thomas Aquinas' manuscript as a small bird. A fledgling, a metaphor for the soul exulting toward triumph and overcoming hardship.
Pat Moss came to the conclusion that art was something that has to be seen with the inner eye. It's not so much what you see on the surface, it's the spirit, it's the soul of art that you want to communicate.
While Pat was busy with college, Pat's father, Vincent, would be stricken with alcoholism and ultimately cancer. His illness caused much grief in the Buckley household and ultimately affected Pat's work at Cooper Union.
But it was a bad year in our house. My father had cancer. He had cancer of the larynx. He was a big smoker and drinker. And so Dad was drinking very heavily, and home was absolute hell. It was just not good. I didn't care about anything else. It was a difficult year to even finish your work. It was a bad year. So that's, they said, they called me in and said, what's wrong? And I did not want to tell them what was wrong. Yeah, in an Irish Catholic family, you don't talk about the problems at home, you know, so, but I'm not that way now. I'm the Italian now. Anything, I'll tell you everything. This doesn't, nothing is sacred because everybody's got problems and everyone should know that your life isn't just all rewards and rewards and rewards. Everybody's got problems of some sort. Everyone has something they have to overcome or whatever, or a family has something they have to overcome. So that's how I lost a year.
Finding solace meant getting away from the city. Pat escaped to northern Pennsylvania, to a vacationing spot called Mill Rift. She found work as a waitress and cook while living at the family summer home. Jack Moss, a chemical engineering student from Georgia Tech, also worked as a waiter at Glenwood Hotel, a resort hotel in Mill Rift. He and Pat would become acquainted over the next few years. By the time Pat got her fine art and graphic design degree in 1955 from Cooper Union, Pat and Jack were engaged.
I think it was just a time in my life, and Jack came along, and he was a nice person, a very nice person. He'd make a good father for kids. And I decided I would get married. That was it.
When we got married is the last year of my being in the service. I was in for 2 years. The second year we got married, and our first baby was born the second year of marriage in 1957.
I love my kids. I could have had 12. My little Italian mother said, one more kid and I don't come back. So there weren't any more kids.
Summer Cottage was on the Delaware River, and there were places where you could swim into the river down there. One time, well, a lot of people came down the river not knowing what they were getting into, and there was a rapids right there in Mill Rift. And a lot of boats got stranded out in the river. And one time, she was 6.5 months pregnant. She swam out and saved a canoeing party by directing the rope to help them get their canoe out of the water and so forth. And I thought that was rather remarkable, and so did everyone else. But that's indicative of how athletic she was.
As Jack and Pat's family grew, they found themselves living in different areas of the country, being led by Jack's career, from New York to Texas. In 1964, the decision for Jack to accept an engineering position at DuPont, a position he had held when their family lived in Wilmington, Delaware, brought the family to the scenic Shenandoah Valley, to the small southern town of Waynesboro, Virginia.
I loved growing up in Waynesboro. I thought it was a wonderful place to grow up. It was a great place. In retrospect, it's a great place, I think, for kids to be. And I think it was a great place for Mom's career to jumpstart.
Well, I think the balance sort of weighed on the side of raising the family, which I think is a fairly natural thing at that age. But that's not to say she did not neglect her painting, but she did not get into it as deeply as she did later on.
As her career developed, Pat became interested in a group of Shenandoah Valley residents with a distinctive, simple lifestyle. The Old Order Mennonites. She also learned about a closely related group, the Amish, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Sometimes called Anabaptists, the members of these groups are Christians whose ancestors immigrated to America in search of religious freedom.
In Waynesboro, she discovered her new neighbors. And her new neighbors were the Amish people, the Amish Mennonites. The Old Order Mennonites and the Country Amish. At first, as a New York City-born Catholic, these strange people in their black outfits, and their strange ways seemed very alien to her. But slowly, as a young mother trying to furnish a large house, and she had to attend auctions, she met the Amish, and she began to talk to them, and she noticed them with their children and with their families. She noticed how they took care of the land, how they respected one another. She admired their family structure. To her, the Amish have become, as I've said before, her living saints. Pat's women become not symbols of desire as much as symbols of, again, I'm going to use the word saintliness, symbols of not a hot passion, but a passionless divinity almost.
I depict a healthy set of values. I depict a love for the land and a love for one another, a love for your children, a love of nature and of animals and of architecture, of everything around you, a respect and a joy in. I think that is, I think that's religious.
Through her newfound muses, the Amish and Old Order Mennonites, Pat would develop an understanding and respect that endures to this day. She embraces their quality of life, icons of strength and natural beauty. The symbolism in Pat's art is better understood by making these simple, plain people her messengers. Her use of negative space, less clutter in one's life, means more peace and reflection. Simplistic Moravian houses with no roof or doors. These symbolic dwellings are the soul that has direct access to God, and graceful black trees that have a dominant presence.
You really have to work. You have to work and work and work and work and work and work and work. And in doing the work, that's when you discover, oh, this is who I am. Look, this is who I am. I've done it here, I've done it here and here, and this is spontaneous and I didn't realize it, but this is who I am. And I think it's like with writing, with words, and with the pictures that you take. And you can say, oh wow, this is something that shows up so often. These proportions show up so often in my photographs. This is where I am. This is where I like. This is where my vision is. It's wonderful because you keep discovering that. And you have to be open to discover that all the time. I very much understand what I'm doing, and I very much enjoy what I'm doing. So I'm playing a game all the time. So I'm doing this very contemporary painting, but in it I'm putting things that you understand. If you have an understanding of the spiritual, of the religious, of the background of all these things, they are in the paintings, and it's fun to get them. But if you don't have that understanding, it doesn't matter. You still have the enjoyment because it's built correctly.
Another of Pat's favorite mediums is etching. The image is drawn on a metal plate. This takes a skillful and confident hand to place a line precisely where it should be, in accordance within the balance of the design on the print. The great master Rembrandt etched the three trees in 1643, showing his extraordinary method. The techniques have changed, but the process remains the same. Pat's adage, creating an etching is a work of love, and no less than that of a painting or drawing.
Etchings take a longer period of time. It can be as much as a year or longer because you're working on a metal plate, and again, an unforgiving medium, which if you make a mistake, it's almost impossible to correct. An art form all of its own, and it goes back pre-Rembrandt, and it's a traditional method of art.
It is so exciting to be etching and to be drawing and to be putting it on a plate. Think of putting something on a plate, but you can't think of the difficulty of putting something on a plate. But when it goes on a plate beautifully, when you have a beautiful ground and your hand is working well. When I get up in the middle of the night, I'm working well. I'm working calm, and I have beautiful lines. When you get that on a plate, you've got it forever. You've got to forever, because then you put that in the acid and those lines bite. And those lines are there, not for one drawing, but for as many as you want to print, because I'm etching on steel, I'm not etching on zinc.
With a limited income and a large family, Pat had motivation to pursue her creativity commercially in order to provide supplemented income. Her work reached the community in sidewalk and craft shows. Hitting the local art show circuit provided invaluable. Pat was making a name for herself and obtaining the coveted position of commissioned artist.
She was working all day while we were at school. She was with us in the evening. She was with us in the morning. If we ever woke up in the middle of the night, she was usually up working. So sometimes, I know for myself, I would get up until I'd fall back asleep again. I'd get up and I'd go sit with her and watch her paint, and then when I was tired enough, go back to sleep. She would say that she had to just paint, and she would send us out of the house. Every once in a while she would let one of us stay in if we were absolutely quiet as a pin. But if we started moving around, we were out of there. It was her time for being alone with her work.
Pat's recognition for her talent skyrocketed when she entered her oil painting entitled Boats for the Virginia Museum's 1967 Waynesboro Chapter Art Show. Pat started the painting while living in Texas and later completed it after the move to Virginia. She won Best in Show and was awarded a showing of her own, during which all of her paintings sold. It was then that the signature name P. Buckley Moss was introduced for the very first time. Pat would continue to paint impressionistically, but at the same time, her valley style, consisting mostly of watercolors, was becoming prominent, and her public almost demanded it.
She's captured in these paintings what I call the stillness and the quietude of the Virginia, particularly the rural countryside of our state, with a little flavor of the Mennonite and Amish people in some of her works.
Her whimsical and flowing artwork was flourishing in the Shenandoah Valley region and starting to reach new heights geographically. Her reputation grew along with her valley style. Pat's audience felt comfortable and at ease and understood what she was trying to convey in her art.
The valley style is a man, woman, children type of painting. The beautiful buildings in the Virginia area.
In 1981, my wife and I took a trip down to Virginia, down to Stewart's Draft. The understanding was that it was a gallery, and we found out after we got there it wasn't. It was her home. It was the only day that it was open. We were there, we were the second and third people that were at the door. It was a rainy October day. She came to the door in a kimono with a bowl of cereal, no makeup, and her hair was not combed, and said she needed 15 minutes to finish her breakfast. So I figured that's a woman secure in her skin. She's secure with herself.
To make her artwork more affordable for everyone who wanted to own a piece, Pat began releasing paintings in numbered, limited edition offset prints. The composition of her work was an ideal match for the printmaking process. Thus began the constant, prolific flow of P. Buckley Moss artwork that has been made available in larger quantities.
She's very prolific, and there is some repetition, mainly because she's painting for a reproduction market in many cases.
Pat's ability to reach a broad range of people would soon extend the world over. Her endless work and the perfecting of her art took a toll on her relationship with Jack. The couple parted ways. But new beginnings would soon follow, and Pat would be introduced to a larger audience. Pat's work would be transformed to another level with the assistance of business manager and art dealer Malcolm Henderson. Their relationship would lend itself to marriage, and the management of her artwork would break ground for a solid base in marketing, networking, and gallery exposure with the support of her collectors, bridging together the perfect ensemble.
In a business that is like the apparel industry, subject to fad and fashion, Pat Moss has been able to maintain her position at the top of her career for 30 years or more. And that's rather extraordinary for an artist, and it is testimony to her abilities as an artist. Part of that is due to the fact that she is very careful how her art is used in the marketplace. She keeps very tight control over the uses of her art.
In 1990, showing in the Tokyo Metropolitan Museum, Pat was a participant for what is called the Tokyo 10, a forum for young Japanese students to learn from uninhibited artists. Her audience accepted her work with appreciation and understanding. Her style is something that is very familiar with the discipline Japanese. Professor Shosuke Fokeo of Tokyo Metropolitan Museum saw pros in Pat's watercolor Winter Visitor. The sun will set soon. The red brick house is very far away. I cannot run very fast. It will take too much time. I must hurry. Geese, people, all that you see in the works of this artist talk to you even in your own language, Japanese.
I've been on television with Tetsuko Kariyanagi, who is, I always called her the Johnny Carson of Japan. She was the star of Japan. Beautiful, beautiful woman, and intelligent, and I was supposed to be on for a couple of minutes, for 5 or 10 minutes at the most, and as we went through the 5 or 10 minutes, she said, cancel the rest of the program. We're going to go with this the rest of the way. Little old Japanese ladies would get up close to me and they'd get pictures taken. It was really, and they'd say, Tetsuko, Tetsuko, you know, because everybody knew Tetsuko. She was, and what you loved about Tetsuko is I had read her book, and her book was called Toto-chan, and it was really about a little girl who was dyslexic. And this turned out to be a star, the star of Japan. She is absolutely gorgeous.
Her art was truly appreciated by the Japanese, who saw in her subtle use of colors and in the subtleties of her art. Japanese artists created a let's pretend world, a perfect world, made up of courtesans and warriors that, again, float, that are almost godlike or goddess-like. And they used subtle colors, and they used a lot of deep Oriental iconography to express feelings that were part of the Japanese culture. I don't think she paints the American dream, I think she paints the human dream. She paints a very perfect world, a world that certainly, if one is not an optimist, one is a pessimist, and one looks at the darker side, a world that you're probably not going to agree with. But it's a world that many people are seeking as human beings.
The P. Buckley Moss Society, with 38 active chapters and 15,000 members, raises funds for a myriad of children-related charities.
The P. Buckley Moss Society started in 1986, that's 20 years ago now. And at the beginning it was a small group of collectors who wanted to get together to be able to talk about their love of Pat's work. In no time, this small group of collectors had grown into the thousands, and they needed a mission. So Pat and the Society worked together on the Society helping Pat get her artwork into the hands of needy organizations so that they can raise funds.
She has always been involved in some sort of charity. I mean, as a kid, I remember that we always went through things and donated to the Salvation Army. I remember that she's always been very big about helping people whenever she could. I remember her stopping to pick up a mother and a daughter that were walking in the rain with groceries to give them a ride to their house one time. They weren't people who had a car, and she stopped with a car full of kids and picked them up and took them home. She was always very much in a helpful mode.
The P. Buckley Moss Foundation, however, educates teachers on how learning impaired children should be taught and works for the preservation of the arts in public school systems.
The foundation was started by the society, and it's a nonprofit entity of the society. We raise money at our conventions and at our different parties that we have for the foundation. Specifically, some of our chapters raise money to help send a teacher to this Creative Mind conference that they have once a year. They bring teachers in and have teachers that teach how to work with children with learning different problems.
We do have a national program, and I have worked on funding for that program, which is specifically designed to help educate handicapped children. And by teaching them that they can paint, that helps them enormously.
For peaceful interludes, Pat spends time in her studios in St. Petersburg, Florida, and in Matthews, Virginia, a quiet tidewater coastal fishing town in eastern Virginia. Relaxing in her Chesapeake Bay House studio with her flowers and the flowing creek nearby, Pat creates soft, airy paintings, piece by piece. An array of watercolors dispersed around her table, numerous brushes awaiting different tasks. It's clear that Pat is in her element.
Farewell,
Matthews is a very peaceful and laid-back kind of place, and it is very conducive to, certainly for Pat, to her creative process.
It's a very earthy, neighborly, hometown sort of little neighborhood, and it isn't perhaps where you would expect me to live. Just very lovely. I love the light sparkling on the water, jumping on the water out there. I like seeing the boats out. I know that they're pulling up the nets. I went out on one morning, and it's just beautiful when you go out on one of those boats at 4 in the morning and the sun comes up.
She does have an infectious spirit that rubs off on people. She comes into the office and everything clicks up a notch. She doesn't feel like she has to be the big artist. She just acts like herself.
And so for her to go through those years and come out as successful as she is, my hat goes off to her. I mean, that's why I took my class to go visit her. I wanted them to see that it can be done. They always refer back to Miss Moss. And I think that's really neat, you know, that she's stuck in their head all year long, because that was an early field trip.
I've had a lovely, charmed life, and if you know my life, you'd say, oh, she calls it charmed? No, but I think it's been a charmed life. I have 6 beautiful children. I have 10 grandchildren that are wonderful. I think you drive your own passion. I think that we all drive our passion. You either have the energy or the passion, or whatever you call it, to do what you want to do. You've got to have the energy to be successful. If you love what you do, you're successful. For as long as I live and for as long as I'm healthy, I shall work and enjoy it. I enjoy the people that I work with. I enjoy the people that I meet. I love my life, so no matter what my life is or whatever it has in the future, I will enjoy it.
A DVD copy of this program is available for $19.95 plus $4.95 for shipping and handling. To order or for more information about P. Buckley Moss, visit wvpt.net/Moss.